been a while.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
You're going to do the whole welcome?
Welcome to the show. This is episode
11.
11. Kiefer, have you watched all other 10 episodes?
I definitely watched.
Okay, that's a lie.
Yes.
So,
Perfect. Well, this is a
Kiefer
great
is
start.
back with us. As you guys know, he is officially full-time, full proven, full everything with us, coach extraordinaire.
Does this
say that?
Does this imply that last time I was on, I was temporary coach?
Yeah.
Yep.
Temporary extraordinaire.
Yeah, that was a trial
If
phase.
the comments were bad, you were...
The community approves, so we approve.
Lovely.
No, we don't operate like that, but yes.
So it's been a while, like we said. We've got some coffees here. Where are these from? Big exciting announcement.
You go, Nick.
We've got Paper Street that's live in the building. So if you guys are coming to Nashville, just know that is here, that is running, and keeping us caffeinated.
Let's maybe go around the room.
Yeah, what do you got there, Kiefer?
Oof.
Explain what the dash is.
Simple. I'm a cold brew with a splash of cream.
Splash of cream.
Yep.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Did you want cold brew or Americano?
What'd you give me?
I know, that's what I was hoping. Whatever you say, I'm going to say yes.
Yes.
What did you want?
Cold brew?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
And then I got an Americano, but what they do differently.
Specialty.
Is it a special? Well, it is
Yeah,
special.
that's like their thing. I've never seen that before.
Right,
What?
so they froth it.
Yeah.
We just said they do that at Crema.
Does that mean I've been there?
Yeah, so they froth this. So that's something new to me. I normally get a hot Americano.
Yep. This is weird to see
latte.
you doing the ice
I
situation.
wanted to fit in with the guys.
And then black cold brew. I'll save my thoughts on black cold brew.
Why?
Compared to cream.
Yeah, okay.
Please
Nope,
enlighten
we'll
us.
move on.
And what do you got,
past
BC? Same as Nick? Oh, yeah,
Froth.
Americano Club.
that. Frothers.
Just Froth Club.
BC came in with 4 cups stacked, one on top
Yeah,
of
where's your
each other
protein
today.
shakes go? I saw
Dang.
those.
That is the best thing they do.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Just
that
so you guys know,
the frozen protein,
we have proven protein recovery smoothies at the front desk.
with a shot of espresso.
Yeah.
If you want
If
it.
you want it.
Yeah, you give me some of that.
I'll
one.
always do that.
I'll
We got
let you-
chocolate and cookies and cream.
I'll let you know the chocolate is a chocolate espresso. The cookies and cream is not. But if you smile correctly,
Dang.
they'll add espresso to the cookies and cream.
Yep. And
If
if you
you're a
use our
good-looking guy.
discount code Shane at the front desk, they give you
And if you're a member,
50% off.
you get a great discount.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's-
it
yeah,
might
that's
be
fact.
worth just moving
Yeah.
to Nashville for.
Hey, we'll take you. But I think excitingly enough, we should talk about what's taking place this
Yeah,
weekend.
what are we at?
The road qualifiers.
Yeah, we were 4 days into this now because they came out early.
Yeah.
They came out a lot sooner than we thought on Thursday, was it? So we've had 5 days to do 4 workouts, which is always fun.
Which turns into 12 workouts.
Yeah, and I think Kiefer and Kyra joined us Wednesday night.
Yep.
And they're here for the weekend of it. So like,
So we've got Kyra, we've got Sid, and then Taylor just decided to jump in. So that'll be fun. That's going better than we expected, I think.
yeah, it's been. I mean, obviously you guys have been here. I've just been away for the last few days, but from all reports, it seems to be going pretty well. I think so much more time on our hands, but yet there's more preparation in terms of like weighing every individual
man.
plate.
I mean, Rogue does a great job of that because there's never questions left unsaid, I think, when the videos come out or issues with standards. So that's always good. It's a pain in the butt to weigh how many plates is that barbell workout?
12
for women?
total?
Yeah,
10?
like 12 plates.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, or at least what I was surprised about of how many people actually enter this, I thought it would have been hundreds.
Yeah.
But because I think they're just after the elite of the elite, I think
There's a big barrier to entry
Exactly,
there.
and it makes sense, right? This is a prestigious event, and
Do you
it's
think going to
regarded.
Scotland kept people from signing up too?
No, I don't think so. I think in Europe, I think we're going to see a higher
Yeah.
amount of athletes sign up, and I think right now they have until 7 p.m. tonight
Yeah.
to
Just
don't
actually
sign up.
and complete the workout. So, I mean, I'm surprised about the amount of people, but the caliber of athletes that I've seen on the list, and speaking to you guys,
that's
are
true.
actually high-end athletes. So it's really impressive to see that. So the margins are pretty small, but I'd love to get your take on it, given that we've done semifinals and quarterfinals, and then we've done a and a competition of that magnitude of road qualifiers, and how that's different. If you got any
Yeah, this
opinions.
is your first online with us.
Yeah, so
online.
like, how was it for you?
It's good. I think Rogue is intentionally prohibitive for a lot of athletes because of the standards and the way that they run things, which works in their favor because then if they only have 50 valid scores that come in or 50 people doing it, it's much easier to review everything. So the nice thing is that
True.
you feel like you get a really high quality of judging and review, and the scores at the end are as close to like perfect for acceptance as we could ask for, which is not something you can really expect of CrossFit at a quarterfinal stage because of the volume. So I think that's a good thing that they do that, but it definitely requires a village to be able to get it done. Like even with 2 to 3 people helping one person, it could take 10 minutes to weigh, measure, prepare just to do a workout.
Well, I think that's the difference with the way they run their qualifiers, right? Like the games is trying to make money.
Yeah.
That's how they run their business, which is good. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think Rogue is in this to truly find like what games athletes may not have got an invite. Let's try to get them to the event to get the best show. So it's good because I think from the video standpoint, I think the biggest quip with us with quarterfinals and everything that happened this year was you have people on the leaderboard that don't even have videos. You have people on the leaderboard that can just skew things without even doing the workouts right. Where this year there's some rogue kind of minute details where people may not even read and get DQ'd right away.
Yeah. And just because of the caliber of all of the athletes doing it, you end up with more disparity in scores than you would get in something like quarterfinals. You get to quarterfinals and you have certain individuals that might take a top 5 in every workout. Well, at this stage, not only are the top 15 from the game sort of sorted out because they get invites, but from there, you get 40 or 50 of the best athletes in the world who inevitably have 1 or 2 wheelhouse workouts where you can't go into it and expect you're going to take 3rd or 5th on every single workout. You might have a 10th or a 15th. And I think from an athlete perspective, it's a much different feeling knowing how few spots there are, but also knowing that you might take a blow on a workout and there's nothing you can do about that relative to the people you're competing with.
Yeah. I think it's been, I think it being in Scotland this year, I'm actually excited for it. I don't know how you guys feel about it. I know it's a lot further for you guys to travel, but I think outside of America, everyone sort of expects the big travel for like the likes of the games and Rogue. So for this to go to Europe, and it is in Scotland, I think that's, we'll be intrigued to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
I still feel for most of Europe that's an excessive travel, but for the most part, it's Europe.
Do you think that a change in venue means that we should expect a change in programming style?
I think naturally they'll play to their 4 walls. So yes, in minute details, I think from a fan, 10,000 foot away, it'll look the same. But in terms of like breaking down the programming and programming for the athletes, it'll look a little different.
Yeah.
And some of these are probably looking into it too much, or possibly just like looking at it from too far away, but the likelihood of offsite events outside probably a lot less given like the time of the season, the climate out there. It's like very
Overcast, rainy.
yes please.
Yep.
All the above. So that it's going to make it hard to start doing some of these other events. However, I do hear, or based off like research of the venue, it's quite large. I think it's, well, let's look at it the same as the games, what we had this year. So the variety of things that could take place in there are substantially larger
Do you know what that's used
than
for?
Scotland.
Is it
Than
actually a
in
sports complex?
the last year's games. I did look this in. I look into it. I looked in the Instagram and looked into the venue and how they set it up. But I think it's just multi-complex.
Everybody just keeps calling it Avengers HQ. Have you seen that?
Yeah, the buildings are pretty gnarly.
That's awesome.
It looks pretty high tech. But like, I think really excited for that. We're going to announce some of our athletes doing that in the weeks to come. But in terms of like structuring and going through that process, I feel like we got to wait for this weekend to take place, and then we're going to start building out our template for that. So from now, we've got 8 weeks before the event to start. So we've got this great road ahead of us and programming and developing our athletes for that. I think some of the nuanced details is like actually traveling over there now. So for some of our guys, they're traveling from either Australia or outside of Australia already. So that was inevitable. But I think for the Americans now that will participate, they're going to get their real birth of what jet lag can feel like too. So I think there's some of the nuanced details that we got to factor.
For people, like say this was for a Jay or Maddie or somebody like that, like how do you approach this in the middle of the off season, knowing that they're also kind of regrouping and preparing for next year?
Yeah, I think this is now our 3rd or 4th take at the Rogue Invitational, so it's sort of now built into the athlete's mindset of, okay, this is a part of the season now.
Sure.
I do remember the first year or two of it being in this part. It was really hard for the athlete to mentally or psychologically get behind it. so soon after the games. I think, to be honest, with those two athletes, it's actually navigating them quite differently, giving one a shorter road to Rogue and giving another one a longer path to the Rogue event in Scotland. A lot of it is just holding on to that residual fitness that they've had at the games and not trying to fry their CNS too early or at all. It's just allowing good movement, just building some good patterns up again, dropping the percentages back down on the weightlifting like we always see. And this time of the season, it isn't really to build upon weaknesses and looking for large improvements. It's more so, okay, we're going to try touch them a few extra times a month, but we're not expecting massive gains. Where in the off season after Rogue, it's okay, let's really categorize what we need to work on, and let's put a lot more effort or percentage work into that to see a bigger gain for the season ahead, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I feel like with the athletes that you coach, you're more used to big, long build up towards the games. Off season, you may have something like Rogue, but not a whole lot else going on. I'm probably more accustomed to having athletes around that semifinals level, where 2 to 3 off-season comps is more of where they make their, whether it's their money or their exposure or their competition experience. And so I think the way that they perceive how the off-season should look is much different, because even if you say that you're putting your eggs in the basket of semifinals to qualify for the games, athletes all have an ego to where they don't want to show up to a comp and have to have the excuse of, I'm in my off-season phase, I wasn't peaked for this event. And I think that's a really challenging conversation to have. Yeah,
for sure. And I think they're just setting expectations quite early on of hey, we're committed to this and this is what it looks like, so to speak. And each athlete's individual to that too. So I completely understand that. I think looking at the programming for Rogue, though, in the past, it's certainly not like the games. There is some overlaps, like the caliber of athletes and the amount of workouts there are. But if you look at the finer detail of the programming, you can see some shifts or what they're prioritizing as their main focus. And that's something you got to identify quite early, especially when you've got some bodyweight specialists where they won't see those workouts really play out too much at Rogue. And I think there's some of the nuance or details where you just got to really build them up and hopefully have a great progression for them to work on some of the areas that we see tend to happen at Rogue. And that's that moderate to heavy barbell. And that's the seeing a lot more machine or the echo definitely being a factor in there. Seeing weight added to gymnastic movements like a ruck rope climb or a ruck run or sandbag, where you're actually adding load or weighted GHDs. So a lot of these things you need to start factoring in quite early on for those type of athletes as well.
Which was good because they programmed the qualifier that way. The Q this year was actually, I think, pretty close to what you'll usually see there, where I think sometimes in the past they've gone off a little bit and been more typical CrossFit, and then people that come out of the Q go to the event and they're pretty surprised. But I think that's what you said about the Q this year. You're more excited about the fact that that type of athlete is probably going to do just as well when they get to the event. Obviously, you're adding top 10 games athletes in there, but they're not going to be completely thrown off by the programming.
Yeah. I do think that's an interesting thing. Having had an athlete in Kiefer go compete there last year, you could finish first in the queue and still be objectively the 16th best athlete at Rogue. And I think that's a hard blow for a lot of people to recognize. You assume if you do well, you assume that if you do on the qualifier, you might do well at an event in any other circumstance. But here it's you're earning a spot to show up and compete against people.
It's the games.
It is a games field. And so anything better than a 15th finish at Rogue is often a good finish for an athlete who's still on the come up and trying to get to that level.
So you've got rookies this year who are coming off the games doing the Q.
Yeah.
I know that's much different for a lot of people than when they're used to that mindset. I think Sydney Wells is right now, where her season's just kind of getting started rather than ending and starting. She's just been going the whole time.
Yeah.
And you've seen that this weekend. How's that been for them?
I think it's different. Kiefer did it last year after the games, but she competed team last year.
Yeah.
And so we were able to ramp up, and she almost felt like she was coming off an off season, was really excited for it, because for her it was looking ahead to a year of competing individually after being on a team. And we assumed that this year might feel the same, and just isn't that way. Yeah. And I think you can't expect a whole lot else. It's not that the fitness isn't there, but I think that there's a there's a CNS component and a mental component of getting to that extra place where the top scores will always be, that it's just hard to expect of somebody so early in the offseason.
And it's so true, right? Like, these guys spend all year building up for the games.
Yeah.
You take 1 week off and it feels like after the games, you take 1 week off and you're back to square one. Like, we're holding our own against some of these guys. So that's saying something. So I think, like...
Who are you holding your own against?
I don't know.
Don't bring up names. That's
Come
not
on.
nice.
Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, man. You check my work.
But that's like for those guys, because you would say Kyra semifinals was her event this year.
Yeah.
Like she had to win, not win, but like that's her win for the year.
Yep.
Because otherwise your season's over.
For Gracie as well, yeah.
Where you get these people like Jay and Maddie, where it's not a inevitability that they're going to make the games, but you're not really priming them to exactly, and Tia too, to do semifinals. So it's like their season just keeps getting pushed more and more, and people like Gracie and Kyra just have to rest at some point.
Yeah.
I think they're still doing a great job and they're having fun doing it, but it's a tough situation when you're coming out of that.
Yeah.
Because we even have Tier coming up in a week, 2 weeks.
2 weekends. So
and Grace is doing that.
Yep.
So it's just another thing thrown into there that's even tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the nice thing for both of them is that they both said they wanted to do the qualifier. They would obviously love to compete at Rogue in Scotland. Rogue does a great job taking care of the athletes, paying for a lot of things. They said, but if I don't make it, it's not going to upset me the same way not qualifying for the games or something like that would.
100%.
And I would say, I said this the other day, that they were both at the fittest that I've ever seen them at semifinals this year, which is not to say that we didn't have a productive games prep, but I think that the preparation for semifinals and knowing the tasks they needed to get over the hump to make the games the first time was the best that we could have asked for. And games prep for the first time for a lot of people is you're throwing so many new things into the mix. You're getting outside of comfort zones more. We developed more skills, and I think we got fitter, but I think
Do you think it's broader?
It's so much broader that I think that there are certain things
dilute a bit of
that weren't as sharp.
Yeah.
And that's something that I can take note of, but I also think it's something that they have to adapt to year after year, because you would get this like fire hose the first year of all these new things that we're throwing in, but then every year you have a little residual of things you hold on to, things that's like, okay, we did well on this, I don't need to push this as much, let me focus on these other pieces. And I think that's why you see veterans that have been around 2, 3, 4, 10 years doing better and better, because you just layer these foundations that you don't have to emphasize as much.
And I think we can only peak so many times in a season.
Yeah.
Right? Like any older sport or any strength and conditioning, like a powerlifting meet or Usain Bolt or running, whatever it may be, they look at the calendar and they go 1, 2, and 3. We're not going to peak every second weekend, or we're not going to look at the old mentality of like, hey, fitness all year round. Like you pick a handful of events and you work backwards from there to make sure that they get the right roadmap to that event. And I think that's where the sport is, and that's why I'm saying like Rogue now is a part of their calendar year, and that's like, hey, I want to be ready for that one, for the top 20. And I think maybe this is a great segue for all the other athletes, like looking at what the off season looks like, probably for our tracks and stuff, or some of our one-on-ones. But I mean, that looks a lot different. I don't know if you want to take this.
Because we have over 40 semifinal athletes now alone, which is even a different tier of people that are just trying to get to a quarterfinal or even scrape into a semifinal.
Yeah.
So it's like for us, I think we're at a point now where you, Tim, Shane, you're laying out the groundwork for 2025. But it has to start. I mean, our first cycle was 3 weeks ago. It started, right?
Yep.
And that's where it starts for a lot of people, where they just feel like, all right, January's here, now I can get into it. Where our guys have already started that by 3 weeks. And obviously, like you're saying already, the games athletes need that time off. But it seems like, and I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on this. If somebody let's just use somebody that wants to go to a semifinal. We've got a guy here that just moved here. Jacob, right? And he was a few spots out of semifinals, right? And he's taking that next step to be here in person. He's working with Jarrett one-on-one. He'd probably be a perfect guy to talk about in this, because it's the same as a lot of the people on our compete track. So, like, where do you put your thoughts now? First cycle's happening. Now let's talk about the next one, bringing us into the beginning of the year.
I think for me, there's two components to it. I think first you have to look objectively at metrics in their conditioning, their weightlifting, their gymnastics, and say, okay, what are 2 or 3 areas that we really need to see improvement? Because I think when you single those things out, it's much easier to build a linear progression to get better. It's much easier to get better at running if we're just focused on a running piece. It's much easier to get better at weightlifting if we have a linear progression, and so on. And then at the same time, use data points from 2024, quarterfinals being a good example, to say like, okay, was there 1 or 2 workouts that really hurt us? Was it the wall ball burpee box jump over workout in that long time domain, very, just kind of uncomfortable aerobic workout? Was it gymnastics test? Was it the barbell battery work? And finding a data point like that you can use as a mixed modal checkpoint of where we're getting better. Because as much as we want to assume that, all right, if my rowing got better, my gymnastics got better, my weightlifting got better, my CrossFit should get better, at some point we have to put it together too. Mm-hmm. And so I think early off season, we can really focus on those individual components and build those up. But then having a long-term perspective of what is the sort of workout that I need to see this show up in to see improvement and confidence going into the next season.
Yeah, and I'd agree completely with that. It's really, and it depends where the athlete is too, right? If they're jumping from a couple hundreds, trying to make the top 40, I think the roadmap looks a lot longer, as opposed to like classic example of Jacob, where he's right on the fringe of that, and one different workout or movement could have had him in there. So it's exactly that. Identify what areas need to improve on, work on them, but at the same time, hold on to those strengths. And that seems to be what's keeping him close to the front end there. So we want to make sure we work on that. And I think at the same time, and I think we've done a great job of evolving the program where we don't think too far ahead. Before it's like, okay, like we got to work more aerobically and like have that huger component of recovery or being better across a larger base of fitness. But now we're building it to be more sports specific, where it's identifying quarterfinals and semifinal style training and time domains.
Yeah, I think that's a hard part for a lot of athletes, because most of the education that people see or what they see from aspirational athletes is like what they saw Matt do, what they see Tia do, these people that are the tip of the spear who can afford a long off season that's very drawn out, built towards specific things, because there may only be one little thing that's a kink in their armor. Whereas a lot of these athletes that are at a quarterfinals level trying to get to semifinals, it's a much more condensed set of tests. The time domains are much more condensed. It's a little bit more predictable in these things. And so, you know, you'll see trends of people doing 60 to 90 minute runs and these other things that in theory sound great for your fitness, but they're so far removed from the task at hand if you're trying to improve on a quarterfinal score that it's easy to get off track if you don't have specific metrics you're looking at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, do you feel the same about programming as a whole? Like, you see quarterfinals athletes doing vested strict muscle ups, right? Like, it's one of those things where you will probably never see this in a competition because it's what's flashy. They may see Tia do it, they may see whoever do it, but it's probably just wasting their time in training. Is that the same idea?
Yeah, I think you need to spend 80% of your time studying for the test that you're actually preparing for. If you want to spend a little bit of time working more broad skills to become more well-rounded and touch on these other things, I think that's important. But at the end of the day, like, if you're truly saying, I want to make a semifinal, just the same as somebody that's like, I want to make the games from semifinals, you need to have a laser focus on what that test is going to look like. And there is kind of a recipe to each stage of that.
Yep, there is. And it, yeah, exactly right. And there's data points on it too, right? So it's like restudying that test or redo those tests to see if you were improving and working towards it. And that's what's great about our one-on-one coaches. Like, we look at that as a great guide for us to see where we're going and seeing if we're improving on those benchmarks. I know on the off season for like the repeatable games athletes, like say Tia, like I know that the areas that we cover are more broadly associated towards what the games will require or demand. So I that's exactly like a great point there, where what they see is exactly what is probably not what's appropriate for them to do at that point in time as well. And I think, and a bit more context on Tia, it's not that she gets bored of it, but I'm trying to innovate or new ways of keeping her stimulated and working on towards progressing still. Fresh, because after like 12, 13 years of doing it, sometimes the barbell gets monotonous for her even.
Yeah. Well, for her, she can spend 8 months broadly focused on the games, and then 6 weeks where you ramp up for a more specific semifinals type of test, 4 weeks just to sharpen up for those things. Whereas somebody, even say Kiefer or Gracie, who made the games this year, I would not consider that to be a guarantee year to year. We still would want to spend 6 months broadly focused on a semifinals type of test. And I'm okay with then saying, okay, just our games prep is more focused on games. There's certain things that we may not have touched all year that would help at the games, but it doesn't matter if we don't get back there yet. And until you show a really good consistency at that level, it's really hard to take the focus away from it, because nobody wants to be an athlete that made it one year and then couldn't make it the next year because they weren't prepared, because they became too focused on a test that's too far out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Tia, she's going to do SoCal. What will
Yep.
your plan? Like every off season, she's had something to do. Like obviously last year was Willow, so I mean, and then Rogue coming back, which was a big emphasis for you guys. Which I would say you probably took that the most serious out of any off season training that you've done.
Yep.
And then years before was bobsled and everything else. What's the plan going into SoCal? Like, how would you train for that? Will you change anything? Will you do anything specific there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So SoCal's in like 2 weeks' time. Preparation for that, to be honest, for me, it's like, how do I maximize Tia's longevity in her career? And that's working alongside Tia. So it's in fact maximizing recovery and downtime. So we've utilized this time now just to spend more time as a family and working on more of an off-season where we can. And now ramping up for SoCal with 2 weeks to go. Sure, she's been in the gym moving around and putting more focus onto that. Each day she's putting more emphasis on that event. Fortunately, it's in a team setting. And fortunately, she's got some great athletes around her. And she gets to also pick that liberty of like, oh, you know what, I'll do this event. Great, you do that event, so to speak. So she has that freedom there. I know when 3-2-1 goes, she's going to try to do her absolute best. She's going to have the mindset of a champion, and she's probably going to have a body of a semi-finals athlete. So that's some realities we've got to work through. But it is different. I think it's more for her like a great opportunity to feel like she can soak in at an event, and she hasn't had that for a while. And I don't. And we say that humbly or in a great position where she's always been laser focused for an event and has a goal in mind. This one here is like she still has the same goal, but this time she gets to share it with others and then be more a part of the community more than ever. So I think that seems to be a big, strong draw card for her. And then we've got some exciting events coming up next year that we'll share in due time, but that's probably to layer on another event, sort of like bobsled. But for now, really excited for that. And then building for the CrossFit season in the future too. So there's some of the things there. So you're right, like it looks different this year for what that will feel like in the in-person event. So if you are going, we're excited for that. I think Tia's got some activations, or she's going to be more personally in the booth areas. So she hasn't done that since 2015, which is
by not her choice.
But like that, and that's probably like that's probably more me saying, hey, let's just navigate. Yeah, and I think, so she's really excited for that event too. So we're pumped to be a part of that.
I think that event's got a lot of potential. Like we've talked to Dylan quite a bit, where like they know athletes aren't going to be completely primed to go into this, and they don't want that specifically because you're putting your best people out there based on their skill set, not to be the best all around. Which I think is awesome. Like I think that event could be the cool in between, to where if somebody is burnt out from the games, doesn't want to do Rogue, they could still do that and really have a good time. And I think the fans, I mean, it looks like it's going to be an awesome set.
Yeah, I think they got many divisions just like they do in Miami, so it's going to be pretty packed in terms of like events or
in California at that time, beautiful weather, it should be great.
Oh, nice.
I think any chance we get for people to get closer to the athletes' personalities too is really good for the athletes, good for the sport. And so this, even in some of the banter they've already had, is going to be really helpful to.
I mean, you've seen Brett and Pat already going at it, and I think, like you said, Tia is always very at a competition flipped on to where you're not going to see anything but the champion of Tia. Where I think at this one, like you put a mic in her face during one of these events, she's probably going to be more willing to say something, which is like what people need to see, and I think that's how they grow to know our athletes better, which is cool.
For sure.
Yeah. And Grace, like for rookies like that too, maybe a little bit nervous, but like it'll be an awesome opportunity for her to compete with people that she looks up to that have been around for a long time because she's so young.
I think even for her, she's excited for an opportunity to feel less stressed at a competition. Right? Like semifinal is very stressful. Your first games is very stressful. Competing in Down Under last year, you feel like you have to prove something for your region. This is now it's a reward for the work that you've put in. Everybody's going to compete hard, but you don't have that same level of stress.
Yeah, because I don't know if people remember the CrossFit Invitational. So that was a great off-season comp where no one was really at their peak fitness, but they got to do an exhibition over a few hours and then really integrate into the community. So I feel like that's where this is going, and that's really inviting.
Yeah, I think the athletes on the individual side are so used to feeling like people are hyper-focused on how they execute on a certain workout and be like, wow, they didn't do as well as I thought, or wow, they did so good on this. And this, even in the events where there's only a couple people going, I don't think that the fans are looking at it that way. They're
Yeah.
looking at it more as just this team spectacle, this race overall, and it's more of an enjoyment factor where, even if you're not at your best fitness, you don't have to feel embarrassed about how a certain thing went to the same degree.
Yeah, I think so too. What else we got? We might have to wrap it up
Yeah,
here.
that's we've got to go. I think athletes are waiting for us out there,
I'm getting a bit itchy about that. I know we all are.
or we just have to work out.
It's true.
Yeah.
4 days in a row.
4 days in a row. We
Hurt.
don't take off days.
Hurting.
That's what his new rule is.
4 days in a row?
No, we just
No.
don't take off days.
Well, if you plan a day off,
Yep.
and then you have unexpected days off, all of a sudden you got 5 days off in a week.
Mm-hmm.
If you plan to do something every day, then when those days come, it's
Coach science.
It's facts.
All right.
our coaching training program is coming
So
out
we
soon.
got SoCal, come see us.
Yep.
TN Chan will be roaming around there. Rogue probably, see you there too. And then we've got some cool events coming up. Coaches Congress
Yep,
is going
in
to be
Australia.
in November
In
in Brisbane.
Brisbane, yep.
So tickets are still there. A lot of you guys have asked about that. We'll be there as well, doing a camp at a local gym or two while we are in town,
And
which will
we've
be
also
awesome.
got some talks at the event at the
Yeah, we're all
Coach
speaking
Congress.
at Coaches Congress, and then obviously our coaches are
I'm
going to
still
be
building that out.
We're trying to get this guy over to Australia for the very first time, run some workshops,
Sorry,
do some
Mom.
workouts.
Yep.
Thanksgiving too, I know.
Potentially.
We don't
We'll
do
see.
that in Australia.
Yeah, we don't.
But yeah, if you guys got questions at all on the next topics as well, if you guys have
Yeah.
any more comments on programming, you want to just talk to any of our coaches, our email will be at the bottom of this video, and then comment as well.
All the best.